Great.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's really an honor to be here with you today. And I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about reporting invasive species as well as data sharing. So kind of as a preamble on how to report invasive species, I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of reporting invasive species and sharing information. If you were in the previous iteration of this, you saw this bioinvasions curve. I think it's something that we need to reflect on more. And the bioinvasion curve shown here illustrates how invasive species populations grow over time if there's no prevention or management, to a point where the species cannot be fully removed, whether it's at a site, park, whatever management unit, the national scale, the regional scale, or even the North American scale. And to be effective in reaching our management goals, we need to think about moving the point of typical early detection closer to the point of ideal early detection. And if we're successful in doing that, we can be more effective at truly eradicating invasive species and move beyond long-term control forever. So water and land and everything that relies on that are kind of the foundation of life here in the Pacific Northwest. They're a cornerstone of our food, our recreation, our culture, our economy, and our way of life. And I think that really speaks to why we're talking about invasive species and why we're talking about this important issue. Our water, our land, and our resources are at risk from invasive species that aren't yet present. And we know that, for example, freshwater invasive mussels will change everything about the Columbia River Basin and everything that relies on that. And thinking about the invasion curve, we're at a point where these are not yet present in the Columbia River Basin. And so we're at a point where we're at prevention. Invasive species can also directly harm and prey on salmon and other beneficial fisheries. And today, the #1 threat to salmon in Washington is northern pike, which is spreading from illegal introductions in northeastern Washington down the Columbia River system. So thinking about that prevention scale, there's areas where it's not present and we can prevent it. There's other areas where it may just be establishing and it can be more early detection, rapid response. And then other areas where they're very widely established, and that's more about long-term management that's sustainable. Some invasive species indirectly impact habitats as well as water quality and other plants. They may cause stream bank failure. They may cause sediment to enter the water, and they might do this through shading out beneficial vegetation along our streams and our wetlands, or they even could be animals that perform a similar function through their rooting and tilling in the soil. So at all these different scales, invasive species are a challenge because they spread from one jurisdiction to another. Your neighbor's problem will become your problem with time. And if we want to be truly effective at addressing the shared problem of invasive species, we need to share information and begin to address this problem together. And we can do this, and we can ensure that our neighbor's problems don't become our own problems. So how do we begin to work across jurisdictions so we can be aware of what's around us and threatening our lands? Data collection and data sharing is one way we can scan that horizon for new problems that threaten our jurisdictions. And the general public, as well as your tribal members, can be really helpful by being aware of invasive species and reporting any sightings. So fully acknowledge and respect that there are data sovereignty issues, but the mantra is see something, say something. And your tribal natural resources department, your university extension office, or the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, those contacts are great places to start. If you see something, just say something to someone, please. But I do want to say that there are some species that might be of national or state significance, and there might be resources and assistance that will become available if you say something. And wanted to just spotlight some of those areas. Again, this is not all inclusive, but plants and diseases, there's places you can go to find your State Department of Agriculture. For aquatic animals, there's a really great North American system created by the U.S. Geological Survey. And you can pull up any aquatic species and you can see the distribution. And then for aquatic and terrestrial plants with an asterisk, can be used for everything, but there's more plants than anything in there. The early detection distribution mapping system is a really great source that's used across most of North America at this point. So wanted to show why data sharing and why collecting data is important. And there's many different reasons. One is to trigger management. But thinking about the invasion curve, if we want to move more toward eradication and early detection, rapid response, we need to be looking at the full picture across the landscape of where species are. And we need to be looking around our jurisdictional areas to see what's on the horizon might be the immediate threat. And wanted to show the example of tree of heaven, which is an invasive tree, which is the preferred host for spotted lanternfly, which is not yet found in our area. And by removing the trees of heaven, we can hopefully prevent and make the welcome mat smaller for the tree of heaven, the spotted lanternfly. And so if you look at data of points around you, you're able to zoom into your own area and get an idea of what could be showing up, and that will help you inform your early detection, rapid response management. Another reason why invasive species data is really important is because most organizations don't have all the funding and the resources that they need to meet their management objectives. And that location data is really important to analyze the impact of invasive species and help build a case to leadership for funding as well as staff to address the problem. If you don't have good location data, you can't really build an adequate and sustainable request for a program. And so you might then not be able to meet all your objectives. And so we need to collect data in order to size up our requests and justify what we're seeking to do.
Justin, 4 minutes.
Thank you. So with increased human movement and trade and changing climate conditions, new species are arriving in our area, in North America, in our states, in our local areas, and location data of these newly arriving species are critical. Oftentimes when something new shows up for the very first time to North America, we may not actually know the risk or if it's a problem. And certainly lots of things are a problem, but it's a question of how big of a problem is it? And if we don't know where that information is, we can't inform research so that we can gain that critical information so that we can determine the priority of that, whether it's something we should invest a lot of resources in or it's something we shouldn't worry much about. And wanted to encourage everyone to go to foresthealth.org and look at a newly emerging forest health disease called sooty bark disease. And at some point, I think Joey Holbert will speak more about that, but wanted to raise awareness of this issue. So with that, there's lots of reasons to report invasive species and share information, and wanted to start the conversation today because if you can't manage something, you don't know where it is. But with my remaining time, I also wanted to give some examples. So talking about prevention and reporting, oftentimes people don't know what they're doing is something that they shouldn't be doing, like intentionally releasing goldfish. And so if you're saying something and reporting such things, you can work with the public or your tribal members to share messaging about what you should avoid doing. Some things are very widely established and there isn't a program to manage it. If you share that information on something that doesn't have funding related to it, oftentimes our partners with University Extension will be able to help to give research and best management practices at no cost to the landowner or to your program. So providing that technical assistance is a really great function of reporting, but if you don't know about that population, you won't be asking for it. Sometimes what you're finding might be something that's never been found in North America. It might be of international or national significance. A great example would be the first detection of Vespa mandarinia, known as northern giant hornet, to the United States. And this was made by a member of the public in Blaine that found a dead hornet on their doorstep and realized it could be a problem and reported it to the Invasive Species Council. Moving into the future, we now have a really great program working to eradicate that from our country.
2 minutes.
Thank you. And then finally, what we will hear is that invasive species move along different pathways that are all related to humans and human activities. And there are an infinite number of pathways, and we can build programs and policies to try to prevent things. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be something that no one expected. And one example would be zebra mussels that were found on marimo mossballs, which is an aquarium algae in trade. that were wild harvested in the Ukraine and then shipped to the United States in the pet trade for use in aquariums. And the public actually found at a pet store these mussels growing in their juvenile stage on the moss balls and reported it in Seattle. And that actually turned out to be something that had happened across the whole United States and into Canada as well. And so it just goes to show you that if you find something, it could be something that's very significant. And really that at the end of the day, telling someone, anyone, is the most important thing. And that can help lead to research, management, as well as advocating for long-term sustainable funding. So thank you all very much, and I'll pass it back to Joey.